rights workers Goodman, Cheney, and Swerner, the Unabomber, terrorists who bomb U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, organized crime family kingpins, the murderer assassinated Medgar Evers, Pan Am 103 bombing, Soviet diplomat that had a spy ring during World War II, Aldra Ames, Richard Hansen, Alger Hiss, and others for espionage, World Trade Center bombing in 1993, TWA 847 hijacking, Lindbergh kidnapping, Beltway snipers, Klansmen who killed 4 little girls in the 16th Street church in Birmingham. And of course, on the other hand, the Russians are known for shooting down a civilian airline, KAL-007, killing 269 passengers and crew, annexing Crimea and invading Ukraine, killing journalists, propping up Assad, the butcher of Damascus, building the Berlin Wall, imposing an Iron Curtain against freedom, and committing cyber theft and conspiring and doing a sabotage of the American presidential election in 2016. Perhaps our friends on the other side of the aisle can show more respect for the FBI and the DOJ, as so many of us do, including myself. So let me ask these questions, and with my limited time, I really need just a yes or no. Are you in the business of helping to secure the elections in 2018 and making sure that there is an infrastructure in the DOJ to help states have secure elections? Yes or no?
Yes.
Special Counsel Mueller, I'm reminded, some of us would say we read it in the history books, of the Saturday Night Massacre. I know you must be aware of it. During the meeting of May 8, 2017 with you, Sessions, and the President, the day before Comey was fired, what did you discuss regarding the FBI investigation?
Congresswoman, as I've explained previously, I'm not going to be discussing anything related to that until after the investigation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Attorney General. Let me then go forward with the question of the protection of the special prosecutor. Do you have in place a protection scheme or system that would void a potential Saturday night massacre? Do you, in fact, have the authority to stand up against the president who is putting out the right-wing media to taint the Mueller investigation? Will you protect Mr. Mueller if he deserves the protection and has done nothing to violate his duties and responsibilities?
As I've explained, if he hasn't violated
his duties, yes or no, Mr. Deputy Attorney General?
I won't take any action unless he's violated his duties.
Let me show you these individuals here. It says that the Trump accusers want a day in court, or at least want to be heard. The president is the chief executive and law enforcement officer of the United States. Therefore, he is an officer of the United States. What does the Department of Justice, what intentions do you have to allow these women who are accusing the president of sexual misconduct and have never been heard in terms of a public setting, as many of us on this committee, women on this committee, Democratic women on this committee, have asked for this committee to hold a hearing with these women? What does the Department of Justice intend to do in light of the fact that the president is the chief law enforcement officer of the United States of America?
I don't think I have any position on that, Congresswoman. If they file a lawsuit, they're free to do so. It wouldn't be a department matter.
Would you not believe that it's important to give these women a forum to be heard? The Department of Justice, the FBI investigates. I just gave a long litany of the great successes of the Department of Justice.
If there's anything that warrants federal investigation, Congresswoman, we'd certainly look at it.
So can I refer these women? Can we refer these women to the Department of Justice? If they walked up to the Department of Justice, would there be an intake officer, an FBI officer that would take their complaints?
If somebody wants to file a complaint of a potential federal crime, yes, they can report that to the FBI, or they can write. Anybody can do that at any time. And
well, then let me publicly say to these women, you have one option at this time, is to go to the Department of Justice, as the Deputy Attorney General has just said to us, to be able to file a complaint, and I would encourage them to do that. I would also encourage this hearing as well to do this committee to have hearings. Let me ask this last question regarding the whole question of commutation program of President Obama, and of course the memo by Attorney General Sessions that rescinds memos regarding the charging and sentencing policy and also the use of private prisons. That was by Eric Holder. What is the position of the U.S. Department of Justice as it relates to a fair and just commutation program, and also the issues dealing with over-prosecution and the sentencing policy that was offered by Eric Holder, which was considered fair and just, and the use of private prisons have been known to be abusive to prisoners and do not allow FOIA requests to go forward. What is your position on that?
Time of the gentleman has expired. The Deputy Attorney General may answer the question.
Thank you.
Chairman. You've raised a number of issues, Congresswoman. I don't know that I have time to respond to them all, but I do just want to clarify, anybody is free to report to the Department of Justice when they believe a crime is committed. It's not a complaint in the way that you might file a complaint in some local police departments. You're free to report any allegations, and the department will conduct appropriate review, as we do with any allegations of alleged criminal conduct. We initiate investigations, though, only if we determine there's proper predication under our policies.
Well,
Thank you.
I'm yielding back, Mr. Chairman, but he did not answer my question.
The time of the gentleman has already expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Ice, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Deputy Attorney General, if someone comes in to make that complaint or to file that information, they're going to have their identification checked for who they are, right, to get into the building?
I'm not certain if they were to admit it to the building. You actually can walk into most FBI offices, I think, without having to go through security.
But you wouldn't consider it draconian if, while they're filing this complaint or allegation, their driver's license was looked at, would you?
Well, if we're going to conduct an investigation, we need to know who the witnesses are.
Thank you. I just wanted to know that that wasn't draconian. In the case of Mr. Strzok, there was an appearance of impropriety that people are observing, but you'd said, well, there may not have been the reason, but if it wasn't the appearance of impropriety based on his numerous rather strident tweets, or not tweets, but text commenting adversely on the president, what was it?
If I said that, Congressman, it was inadvertent. The decision to remove Mr. Strzok off that case was made by Director Mueller based upon the circumstances known to him. It's important to understand, though, that those text messages were uncovered in the course of an Inspector General investigation that is not complete. So we won't be able to make any determination about what, if any, discipline is required.
Well, let me go to the Inspector General now. This is Michael Horowitz, right?
Correct.
Michael Horowitz has repeatedly complained that he cannot, in fact, he does not have the authority to look for impropriety by lawyers as to their conduct as lawyers, because the office of the OPR has that authority. That's still true, isn't it?
It's true, but he does have authority for certain types of misconduct by lawyers.
Okay, so we have a situation in which he can look at some of the misconduct, not others. So one of the pieces of misconduct he cannot look at would be the question of bias or the appearance of bias in their investigations, in how they're conducting it, or decisions. That is uniquely excluded to the Inspector General in your cabinet position versus all other cabinet positions.
I'm not certain about that, and if I may, I'll check and get back to you on that. But it would either.
But he is excluded.
It would either be OPR or the Inspector General. And with regard to conflicts of interest, I believe certain of those are within the jurisdiction of the Inspector General, but I'd have to verify.
Okay, well, you can get back to me on that. These political views that Mr. Shabbat mentioned, and they're pretty clear that these are people who had a strong preference. But notwithstanding that, let's be very candid. Nobody up here is going to claim to be without their political bias. So one of the reasons that when there is a conflict of interest, people recuse themselves, and when there is an appearance of impropriety, they're excused. And one of the reasons that we look to a special prosecutor, and that you appointed a special prosecutor, was to not only get past the politics on this dais, but to get past the appearance of any conflict by the Department of Justice. Is that fair to say?
To minimize any appearance on either side of bias, correct?
Okay, but a special prosecutor under the remaining statute, how it's done, is still a group looking for wrongdoing. That is their charge. They're not looking for right doing, they're looking for wrongdoing. That's fair to say, like any prosecutor, you're not looking for innocence?
The way I would characterize it, Congressman, is that they're looking for the truth, and then they'll make a determination about whether or not it's appropriate to prosecute.
Okay, so my question to you is, if that's the case, if we accept that, my assumption, that they're looking to, if they can, to hang the president or people around him. Hear me out for a moment. Then there really isn't a problem with having people that are dead set on trying to find anything that will incriminate the administration in a Russian connection, which is somewhat their charge. So I'll posture to you that maybe it's not that bad to have people who really dislike the president and would like to hang him. Having said that, when there's impropriety, such as Mr. Strzok, when there is, in fact, a history at the FBI of withholding information from Congress, when there is the appearance of impropriety by the Department of Justice, and when the Inspector General is limited under the statute, both because he doesn't have full access and because certain portions are out of it. Wouldn't you say that this is a classic example where, in order to investigate the FBI and the Department of Justice, a special prosecutor who is equally looking for the truth, if it exists adversely to the conduct of the FBI and the Department of Justice, is within your charge and responsibility to see that happens?
Well,
The time of the gentleman has expired.
You built a number of assumptions
Mr.
into your
Rosenstein,
question,
answer the
Congressman, and my simple answer to it would be that if we believe there was a basis for an investigation or a special counsel, I can assure you that we would act.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would say that since we've already had dismissals for wrongdoing, since there's ongoing internal investigations, the elements necessary to ask for a special prosecutor to, in fact, see what was done wrong already exist.
The time of the gentleman has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Cohen, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to thank you for your service to the country and for accepting the difficult position under the difficult circumstances that you have. Has President Trump ever communicated with you about removing Robert Mueller from his role as special counsel?
Congressman, I am not going to be discussing my communications with the president, but I can tell you that nobody has communicated to me a desire to remove Robert Mueller.
You said you're not going to relate your conversations with President Trump. How many conversations have you had since your appointment with President Trump?
I'm the Deputy Attorney General, Congressman, and it's appropriate for me to talk with the president about law enforcement issues, and I don't believe that's an appropriate issue for discussion.
When you chose Robert Mueller to be the special counsel, what were his characteristics, his history, and the reasons for you to have chosen him for this important position?
I think it would be very difficult, Congressman, for anybody to find somebody better qualified for this job. Director Mueller has, throughout his lifetime, been a dedicated and respected and heroic public servant. He, after college, volunteered to serve as a Marine in Vietnam, where he was wounded in combat. He attended law school and then devoted most of his career to serving as a federal prosecutor. With the exception of brief stints in private practice, he served as United States Attorney in 2 districts in Massachusetts and in Northern California. He served in many other positions in the department after he lost his position as the head of the criminal division when President Clinton was elected in 1992. Mr. Mueller briefly went into private practice, and then he went back at an entry-level position as a homicide prosecutor trying to help with the violent crime problem in the District of Columbia in the early 1990s. He then rose once again through the ranks and ultimately was confirmed, I believe unanimously, as FBI director, protected this nation after 9/11. And then when his 10-year term expired, he was so well respected that his term was extended, I believe also almost unanimously, for another 2 years. So I believe that based upon his reputation, his service, his patriotism, and his experience with the department and with the FBI, I believe he was an ideal choice for this task.
Thank you, sir. I agree with you. FBI Director Wray agrees with you. He said that the similar thoughts. He said he was a smart lawyer, a dedicated public servant, well respected within the FBI. I think everybody on the other side of the aisle agreed with you when you appointed him, and everybody in this Judiciary Committee and probably everybody in this Congress agreed with his appointment as FBI Director, which was unanimous, his reappointment, which was unanimous by Republican Bush and Democrat Obama. Everybody respects that man in this country. He may be the most respected man in this. Obviously, we knew that would be an exception. But the fact is, they didn't start to dislike him until he started to get issues that affected the president that currently serves this country. And because of that, they've said the FBI was in tatters, that the FBI, the chief law enforcement, top law enforcement folks in this country are questionable. Some of their allies on television said they're like the KGB. They've questioned you, they've questioned the Justice Department, they've questioned some of the most loyal, dedicated, fearless people in our country who serve the rule of law. And I find it repugnant and awful, and I wonder what you think about it when you hear about the FBI, which works under you, being suggested it's in tatters and that there's something wrong with the FBI and that they're somehow like the KGB.
Well, Congressman, as I know you're aware, I've expressed concern with certain aspects of certain things done by the FBI, but in general, throughout my experience working with FBI agents over the decades, I found them to be an exceptional group of public servants, very loyal, faithful, and dedicated, and I believe some of the finest people that I know are agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
I thought about them, sir, when I watched the Army-Navy game. And I thought about him because I have the honor, as everybody up here has, of recommending some folks to be at West Point and Annapolis. Those are the cream of the crop. And the people at the FBI are in law enforcement. They're the cream of the crop. And Justice Department attorneys are too. It's not easy to get a job in justice, no matter where you went to law school and what you did. You hire the best. You always have. And I compliment you on that. I hope and know you will continue to hold the Department of Justice up as a pantheon of outstanding lawyers and jurists and take justice where it should go, as truth demands and justice dictates. I yield back the balance of my time.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. King, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Rosenstein, for your testimony here and your service. A number of things I'm curious about here. First of all, in the interview of Hillary Clinton that took place reportedly July 2nd of 2016, how many people were in the room for that? How many people had the opportunity to question her?
Congressman, I do not know the answer to that. I believe when the Inspector General completes his review, we may have additional information, but I personally do not know.
Mm-hmm. And would you know who selected that team?
No, I do not.
Really? Okay. I recall the testimony here by James Comey and also by then Attorney General Loretta Lynch that testified, one of the two of them, that there were 3 representatives of the FBI and 3 representatives of DOJ in that room doing that interview. Would that be consistent with practice that you would anticipate? Am I going to hear IG again?
Typically, we would have at least 2 agents conduct an interview, and there may be any number of attorneys based upon who's on the case. I just don't know the details of that particular decision.
Okay. And the practice in an interview like that, would there be records kept of that interview?
Yes, if there were FBI agents present, typically they would take notes and produce a report summarizing the interview.
Would there be a videotape, audio tape, or a transcript?
Generally, no.
Uh-huh. And why not?
Well, it's just not, it's not the practice to do it.
It needs to become the practice. The practice out across the countryside, many of our local law enforcement is that if you're a county deputy and you're interviewing somebody for drunk driving, you tape that interview. And we have sheriffs out there that will say, if they don't do that, that's cause for discipline. Now we're sitting here with a mystery on what went on in that interview of July 2nd, and there's many questions have been asked about that before and after, and they will trickle through history until we get to the bottom of it. We don't know yet who was in the room. At least you can't tell me who was in the room. Do you have any knowledge that Peter Strzok might have been one of those people?
I do not know.
It's been reported in the news that he was one of those people. Are you aware of that?
I've read a lot of news reports. I may have seen that in the news, but I personally do not know.
I see. And when I look through it, just a timeline here, quickly to drop this into the record, April, May of 2016, Peter Strzok interviews Huma Abedin and Cheryl Mills. Cheryl Mills, who happened to be in the room with Hillary Clinton and her general counsel and her chief of staff and is subject to the investigation. Then on May 2nd, Comey emails FBI officials a draft statement a couple of months before his recommendation not to prosecute Hillary Clinton. And in that chain, Peter Strzok's name shows up. It's been reported that he's the one that swapped out the references from gross negligence to extremely carelessness. I don't know if that's true. Do you have any knowledge about that?
No, but I would point out, Congressman, Congressman, that it's the Inspector General review that has turned up.
I thought that was going to be the answer. And then also skipping forward to July 24th, FBI interviews Michael Flynn on Russia. It's reported in the news that Peter Strzok is in that interview. No knowledge to disagree with the reports that are in the news, however.
Correct.
And then we get the news later on that sometime in midsummer, Peter Strzok had been removed from Mueller's investigative team, but we find out December 4th that took place publicly. I kind of understand that. If that had drifted into the jet stream, perhaps we wouldn't be into the middle of this controversy. But what about if his hands are in so many things, and I've not touched them all by any means, but if he has his hands in this many things, what about the fruit of the poisonous tree? This is the reverse of this. This is the voids of the fruit of the poisonous tree. And I'm looking at what was reported this morning. I just took a picture of the television set on my iPhone just so that we all know what I'm talking about here. A quote from August 6, 2016 text. Lisa Page to Peter Strzok, and they're talking about President Trump. And maybe you're meant, she's speaking to Peter Strzok, her lover, I hear, and maybe you're meant to stay where you are because you are meant to protect the country from that menace. And Peter Strzok's response is, thanks. It's absolutely true that we're both very fortunate. And of course, I'll try and approach it that way. I just don't know it will be tough. It will be tough at times. I can protect our country at many levels. Not sure if that helps. Does that sound like a declaration that he would use his job to leverage his work against the President of the United States?
Congressman, the Inspector General's investigation includes interviews of numerous witnesses, and I anticipate, hopefully in the near future, we'll have a report with the Inspector General's conclusions.
Would you have any opinion on the lack of the fruit from the poisonous tree that might have been erased by Peter Strzok?
Well, as a legal matter, Congressman, I can tell you that if evidence is tainted, then that would raise a concern for me. But typically, our cases would be prosecuted based upon witnesses and documents and not upon the agent, unless the agent personally were a witness in the case. But that would certainly concern us if there were any tainted evidence in the case.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenstein. I appreciate it. And I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your service to the country, Mr. Rosenstein. Based on the language in your special counsel order, or your order appointing the special counsel, does the special counsel have the authority to investigate any individual who may have obstructed the investigation that FBI Director Comey confirmed on March 20th of this year, which was the Russian interference with the 2016 elections?
The special counsel does have authority to investigate any obstruction related to his jurisdiction.
Does this authority to investigate possible obstruction include investigating President Trump?
I hope you won't take an inference one way or the other, Congressman, but as I've explained, that's simply something we do not do. We do not discuss who may or may not be under investigation.
Well, I'm not asking you whether or not the president is under investigation. I'm just simply asking whether or not your order appointing the special counsel authorizes the special counsel to investigate the president.
It authorizes him to investigate anybody who there's predication to believe obstructed justice.
And that includes the president, correct?
It'll include anybody who was suspected of obstructing justice.
All right. Do you think that it's appropriate for the president to comment publicly on any pending investigation?
Congressman, the decision about whether people in political positions comment on investigations is not mine. My responsibility is to ensure that our investigations are not impacted improperly by any opinion, whether it be a member of Congress or anybody else.
Well, it would not be appropriate for you to comment about any pending investigation. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
And the president is the chief law enforcement officer. He considers himself in the country. It would be inappropriate for him then to comment on a pending investigation, would it not?
Congressman, I believe over the years there have been presidents who have made comments about investigations, and it's simply not my responsibility to make that decision.
Well, do you think it's appropriate for the president to publicly call for the investigation of specific individuals?
I'm simply not going to comment on that, Congressman, other than to tell you it's my responsibility, along with the Attorney General, to make sure that those decisions are made independently by the department based upon the facts and the law.
Has the president ever contacted you to urge action in any pending investigation?
Congressman, I have not received any improper orders, and I'm not going to be talking about particular communications I may have which are appropriate communications with the White House.
Well, what would be your legal basis for refusing to answer the question whether or not the president has contacted you to urge any action in any pending investigation? What would be your legal basis for refusing to answer that question?
Congressman, this is not a partisan issue. I worked on an investigation where the previous president encouraged the department to do an expeditious investigation. And so, the question for me is, are we or are we not appropriately making an independent determination, regardless of who comments on it?
Well, my question, I respect your question, but my question is, has the president ever contacted you to urge action in any pending investigation? Yes or no?
I have nothing further to say about it, Congressman.
So you're going to refuse to answer a question from a member of Congress seeking to do oversight?
Now, I've told you, Congressman, that I have not received any improper orders, and I'm simply not going to talk about communications. I think in every administration, the senior law enforcement officers have to be able to communicate with the president and his officials about appropriate matters within their responsibility and not comment on it. So you shouldn't draw any inference. It's simply not appropriate for me to talk about communications I may have with the administration.
So it would be,
I would tell you if something happened that was wrong, if somebody ordered me to do something that was improper, but that has not happened.
well, it would be improper for the president to ever contact you about initiating an investigation of someone, would it not?
We've discussed this previously, Congressman. Presidents have commented publicly, and
No. My question is, it would be improper for a president to contact you about initiating a investigation of someone. It would be improper, wouldn't it?
it would be improper for the president to order me to conduct an investigation that wasn't justified based on
It would be
the facts.
improper for the president to ask you to initiate an investigation, would it not?
If it were for improper reasons, yes.
And so is it your testimony today that the president has not asked you to investigate someone specifically?
Congressman, I understand what you're getting at, but as I said, I was in the last administration, and the president of the last administration commented on matters, and there's nothing wrong about
You're
that.
being very artful in
No, I'm not.
jumping around and evading answering my question, and so you're not going to answer it. And
I'm not evading.
That's unfortunate. Are you afraid of President Trump firing you?
No, I'm not, Congressman.
With that, I will yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gohmert, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for being here, Mr. Rosenstein.
Thank you.
Did you ever tell Special Counsel Robert Mueller that, in essence, everything you do must not only be just and fair, but must also appear beyond reproach? Anything like that?
In essence, yes.
Yes. Well, since Attorney General Sessions recused himself, you are effectively the boss of the special counsel and staff, correct?
It is correct that I am effectively the boss.
Okay. Well, we all know that FBI Director James Comey was fired. We know of your letter. We know of your public statements. But here's a question. To your knowledge, who first proposed the idea of firing James Comey as FBI Director?
Congressman, I'm not going to comment on that. The president has explained that he made the decision, and I'm not going to comment beyond that.
At the time you wrote the letter suggesting a firing, did you believe what you put in that letter?
Yes, I did.
All right. If an FBI employee goes into a meeting as part of his job, in furtherance of his job, someone in the government, and he comes out and he makes a memo memorializing the meeting, perhaps in the future, past memory refreshed, Is that memo DOJ property?
Generally, Congressman, I would think that it would be. It might depend on what's in the memo, what the subject matter is, but generally the answer would be yes.
Well, in the FBI employment agreement, there's a statement that says that, and this is the person agreeing to work for the FBI, all information acquired by me in connection with my official duties with the FBI and all official material to which I have access remain the property of the United States of America. I will not reveal by any means any information or material from or related to FBI files or any other information acquired by virtue of my official employment. If you make a memo of things that were discussed as part of your job, then it would be a violation of that agreement to send that to someone to leak to the press. Isn't that right?
It well may be.
All right. In the question I'm about to ask, I'm not asking what you may have told Attorney General Jeff Sessions. I don't want to know any words used or ideas conveyed nor sources referenced. In fact, I'm asking a question that could not possibly have any other answer other than one of two words. That would be yes or no. You are completely free to wholly answer this question with one of those two words, and neither word is privileged, confidential, or classified. Here's the question. As Attorney General Jeff Sessions' deputy, did you give Jeff Sessions any advice regarding whether or not he should recuse himself in the matter of the Russian investigation? Yes or no?
No. And can I give a little bit of an explanation, Congressman? I appreciate your asking that question. I wasn't there. I was confirmed, I believe, on April 25th and took office on April 26th. I was not there at the time of the recusal.
Right. And you ever talk to Bruce Orr?
Yes.
And wasn't he 4 doors down from yours?
You know, I haven't counted, but he was down the hall.
All right. And of course, he's been demoted over the relationship with Fusion GPS. And then, of course, we found out that his wife, Nellie, was a Russian expert and was paid by Fusion GPS through summer and fall of 2016, helping the Clinton campaign get apparently a dossier from the Russians. How well do you know the people that work on your hall?
Well, it varies, Congressman. I think that's the precise answer. It varies. Some of them I know well, some of them I don't know as well.
All right. Of course, everybody has some opinions, political opinions or otherwise. The key is not having those affect or bias you in the Department of Justice.
Correct.
Well, here is Mr. Strzok, some of his text talking about Trump. He's an idiot like Trump. And Martin O'Malley's, a D word. I'm not watching. I can't tell you how little I care right now. It's talking about the Republican convention, so much more substantive than the representative debates. He goes on, at some point, the Republican Party needs to pull their head out of their blank, shows no sign of occurring anytime soon. Of course, he's, the F, we were told by Christopher Wray, stands for fidelity, but these were all made in the course of infidelity. And then he makes slurs against Kasich. It's just unbelievable. I truly hate these people. Talking about the Republicans, no support for the woman who actually has to spend the rest of her life rearing this child, but we care about, quote, life. And then a-holes. How the F can he be a Republican? And on it goes. America will get what the voting public deserves, and that's what I'm afraid of. God, Hillary should win 100 million to 0. Did you hear him make a comment the size of, anyway, this is not just political opinions. This is disgusting, unaccountable bias, and there's no way that could not affect a person's work. Were you aware of just how biased Mr. Strzok was?
No, I was not.
Thank you. One final thing. I'm asking a question. The answer is not classified nor privileged. Based on information and belief, to the best of your knowledge, has the FBI ever used work product or report, any part of which was paid for by a political campaign, political party, political candidate, or prepared on a candidate's behalf?
Congressman, the issue that you're
The time of the gentleman has expired. The witness may answer the question.
I know that we're working with at least one committee, House Intelligence, that has access to that information. I believe that they'll get whatever information.
Sir, I'm asking a general question. I'm not
The
specifically.
time of the
asking-
gentleman has expired.
But I'm asking-
Choose to
trying to
answer
get
the
an
question
answer.
in the form it was
Not
already
to my
presented.
personal knowledge, but I'm not representing, I don't know everything about the FBI.
And, Mr. Chairman, point of personal privilege, since my character was slandered by Mr. Cohen, who said that we never challenged Mueller until he came after the administration, when he knows how tough I went after FBI Director Mueller. He's been here when I went after Mueller. While Bush was president, he knows I have been after him because of the damage he did, and what he stated about me is a lie. And I need the record to properly reflect that.
The gentleman's comment is duly noted. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Bass, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. According to an August 17th FBI intelligence assessment titled Black Identity Extremists Likely Motivated to Target Law Enforcement Officers, quote, "It is very likely that black identity extremist perceptions of police brutality against African Americans spurred an increase in retaliatory violence." So I've tried to get to the bottom of where this report came from, who did it, what its status is. I've asked Attorney General Sessions, I've asked Director Wray, and so now I want to ask you, did you order the FBI to conduct this assessment?
Sorry, what was the date?
August 2017. August of this year.
No, I did not.
Do you know who authored the report? Are you familiar with the report?
Not familiar with the report. I'm familiar with the general issue.
And so maybe you could talk a little bit about the general issue,
Yes.
in particular, when the FBI began tracking black identity extremism?
I think it's important for me to explain, Congresswoman, that the FBI does not make a determination with regard to domestic groups to investigate them based upon their First Amendment views or their affiliation. It bases its decisions on evidence of a propensity to violence. So with regard to members of any ideology domestically, the FBI would only be investigating if there were some indication.
Do you believe that there's a political movement in the country called black identity extremism?
I don't believe the FBI intends that to encompass a particular political movement. What they do is they try to categorize different threats that they identify.
So you said investigate, but before you do an investigation, there's surveillance, correct?
Generally, no. There may need to be a determination first that there was a basis for an investigation, typically before any surveillance.
So how does that determination take place, and where has it taken place?
If you want details, I need to get back to you. But the FBI does have very strict guidelines. As you know, several decades ago, there was quite a bit of controversy about this issue. And the FBI has very detailed guidelines for when they initiate investigations. And I'm not aware of any departure from those guidelines.
So one thing that, and I am aware of the FBI's history from many years ago, COINTELPRO, and many people are looking at this document, Black Identity Extremism, as COINTELPRO 2. One of the concerns that has been raised and that I raised with Attorney General Sessions and Director Wray is that this document, for whatever reason, was mass distributed to law enforcement offices around the country. Are you aware of that?
No, I'm not.
So when we talked to Director Wray, it wasn't clear how this term was even developed. In other words, what evidence was it based on to even come up with a term like that, and then to write a document about it, and then to distribute it to law enforcement around the country?
I don't know the answer to that, Congresswoman, but if it's of any reassurance, I've been in this job for 8 months. I haven't seen any indication that the FBI is approaching this in a biased way. They're conducting investigations where they believe the person who is the subject represents a potential threat, not simply because they believe in an ideology or associate with an ideology, but because they represent a particular threat. And I believe that the FBI guidelines are designed specifically to ensure that there are no abuses.
So what I am hearing from activists around the country, in particular activists who were protesting law enforcement, police brutality, or of deaths at the hands of law enforcement is that they're being visited by the FBI, that the FBI is leaving, business cards. And then what the concern about that is that if they do engage in a conversation with an FBI agent and perhaps make a mistake or maybe say something that isn't true, then they're vulnerable to be prosecuted for lying to a law enforcement officer. So the activists that have received visits by the FBI have never been involved in violence at all. Are you aware of that happening in any of your offices around the country?
No.
Let me just express another concern about this. When a document that doesn't seem to have any scientific basis, that develops a category called black identity extremism that nobody can say whether or not it really exists, when you send a document like that to law enforcement around the country, in some places, I will worry that they will take that to say that anytime there is an officer-involved shooting and then there is a protest, that the people that protest might be black identity extremists.
Congresswoman, to the best of my knowledge, the FBI is not investigating people who are peacefully protesting. As I said, I haven't read that document. I'll review it, and I'll see what it says. But
I would appreciate it if you would, and if there is no basis for this term, that then the FBI take the step to retract the document and send a message to law enforcement around the country that no such category exists. I yield back my time.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan, for 5 minutes.
Did the FBI pay Christopher Steele, and was the dossier the basis for securing warrants at the FISA court to spy on Americans associated with the Trump campaign? Really, when you sum it all up, it boils down to those fundamental questions. Did you pay the guy who wrote it? And did you use what he wrote, disproven, discredited dossier paid for by the Clinton campaign? Did you use it to go get warrants to spy on Americans? That's what it comes down to. And you're the guy who can answer those questions. And yesterday I was convinced that the answer to those questions was probably yes, but today I'm even more convinced the answer is yes, based on the text messages we got to read early this morning. Mr. Rosenstein, you know Peter Strzok, you familiar with that name?
Yes, I'm familiar with the name. And
former deputy head of counterintelligence at the FBI? Peter Strzok, that one?
I don't know his precise title, but yes, he had a significant role in...
Peter Strzok ran the Clinton campaign, interviewed Mills, Abedin, Clinton, changed the exoneration letter from gross negligence to extreme carelessness. Peter Strzok, who ran the Russian investigation, interviewed Mike Flynn. Peter Strzok selected by Mr. Mueller to be on his team. That Peter Strzok, we learned, had all these text messages. We got to read some of them early this morning. Now, as my colleagues have pointed out, some of them are, they show he didn't like Trump. He and Miss Page are exchanging text messages back and forth, show they don't like the president. But that's nothing new. Everyone on Mueller's team, no one on Mueller's team likes Trump. We already knew that. But I want to focus on one in particular. One in particular. And this is a text message from Mr. Strzok to Miss Page, recalling a conversation and a meeting that took place in Andrew McCabe's office, Deputy Director of the FBI, recalling a meeting earlier. And Mr. Strzok says this: I want to believe the path you threw out for consideration in Andy's office. Then there's a break. Dash, it says that there's no way he gets elected. No way Trump gets elected. He says, I want to believe that. You said that in the meeting in Andrew McCabe's office. I want to believe that. But then he goes, but I'm afraid we can't take that risk. Now, this goes to intent. He says, we can't take the risk. The people of this great country might elect Donald Trump president. We can't take this risk. This is Peter Strzok, head of counterintelligence at the FBI. This is Peter Strzok, who I think had a hand in that dossier that was all dressed up and taken to the FISA court. He's saying we can't take the risk. We have to do something about it. Now, don't forget the timeline here either, Mr. Rosenstein. Peter Strzok, January 10th, he's the guy who changes the exoneration letter from gross negligence, criminal standard, to extreme carelessness. July 2nd, he's the guy who sets in on the Clinton interview. July 5th, 2016, that's when Comey has the press conference and says, we're not going to prosecute. Clinton's okay, we're not going to prosecute. And then August 2016, we have this text message. The same month that the Russian investigation is opened at the FBI, August 2016. And my guess is that's the same month that the application was taken to the FISA court to get the warrants to spy on Americans. Using this dossier that the Clinton campaign paid for, Democrats paid for, fake news, all dressed up, taken to the court. So I got really just a couple basic questions. Because it seems to me if the answer to any of those two questions, if the answer is yes, if you guys paid Christopher Steele at the same time the Democrats in the Clinton campaign were paying, or if you took the dossier, dressed it all up, took it to the FISA court, and used that as the basis to get warrants, and now we have intent in this text message saying that there's another text message, my colleague referenced it earlier, where Mr. Strzok says, I can protect our country at many levels. Says it with all the humility he could muster. I can protect our country at many levels. This guy thought he was Super Agent James Bond at the FBI. This is obvious. I'm afraid we can't take that risk. We can't. There's no way we can let the American people make Donald Trump the next president. I got to protect our country. This is unbelievable. And I'm here to tell you, Mr. Rosenstein, I think the public trust in this whole thing is gone. So it seems to me you got two things you can do. You're the guy in charge. You're the guy who picked Mueller. You're the guy who wrote the memo saying why he needed to fire Comey. You're the guy in charge. You could disband the Mueller special prosecutor, and you can do what we've all called for. Appoint a second special counsel to look into this, to look into Peter Strzok, Bruce Orr, everything else we've learned in the last several weeks.
Yes, Congressman, and I can assure you that I consider it very important to make sure the thorough review is done, and our Inspector General is doing a thorough review. That's how we found those text messages as part of that review.
You've given that answer like 15 times. Let me ask you this. Are you concerned? I mean, this is what a lot of Americans are believing right now, and I certainly do, that the Comey FBI and the Obama Justice Department worked with one campaign to go after the other campaign. That's what everything points to. Think about what we've learned in the last several weeks. We first learned they paid for the dossier. Then we learned about Peter Strzok. And last week we learned about Bruce Orr and his wife, Nellie. I mean, this is unbelievable. So what's it going to take to get a second special counsel to answer these questions and find out, was Peter Strzok really up to what I think he was?
I think it's important to understand, Congressman, we have an Inspector General who has 500 employees and a $100 million budget. And this is what he does. He investigates allegations of misconduct involving department employees. That review that he is conducting is what turned up those text messages. It will also involve interviews of those persons and of other witnesses.
And we're looking forward to his report, and we've met with Mr. Horowitz, and we're anxiously awaiting that report. But that doesn't dismiss the fact that the country thinks we need a second special counsel. 20 members of this committee, the Judiciary Committee with primary jurisdiction over the Justice Department, thinks we need a second special counsel. All kinds of senators think we need a special counsel. What fact pattern do you have to have? What kind of text message do you have to see before you say it's time for a second special counsel?
I want to assure you, Congressman, as I think the Attorney General explained, we take very seriously the concerns of 20 members of this committee or one member of this committee, but we have a responsibility to make an independent determination, and we will.
I thank the chair.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Jeffries, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rosenstein, there are approximately 14,000 special agents within the FBI. Is that correct?
37,000 total employees.
And is it fair to say that a majority of those FBI special agents are registered Republicans?
I haven't asked them, and I wouldn't want to speculate.
Fair to say that a majority of the 14,000 FBI special agents have conservative-leaning political views like much of the law enforcement community throughout the entire nation?
I'm certain that many of them do. I haven't counted.
Now, the Department of Justice apparently last evening invited a group of reporters to its offices to view the private text messages that were sent during the election by Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
Now, who exactly authorized the Department of Justice in advance of a congressional hearing to invite reporters to come view private text message communications between two Department of Justice employees who are the subject of a pending investigation? Did you give that order, sir?
I think it's a very important question you asked, Congressman, because that was one of my concerns about this issue is what is the status of these messages, and is it appropriate to release them? And the determination was made that it is. So we gave notice to their attorneys. We notified the committee. And our goal, Congressman, is to make sure that it's clear to you and the American people we are not concealing anything that's embarrassing to the FBI.
So is it extraordinary that you would invite reporters for a private viewing in advance of a congressional hearing?
Only if the information is appropriate for public release. If it's not appropriate for public release, it is never appropriate to disclose it to reporters.
Okay, now Shannon Bream is a Fox News Supreme Court reporter. She tweeted last evening at 9:29 that Fox News producer Jake Gibson has approximately 10,000 text messages between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. Now, it's my understanding that only about 350 or so were released to this committee. Is that correct?
There are others that are being reviewed, and we've assured the committee chairs that we're going to produce them as soon as we have them available. There's some redactions that need to be made.
So how is it possible that Fox News apparently has 10,000 text messages?
I wouldn't assume that's true just because it was in the news, Congressman. I'm not aware of that.
Okay, but this is a Fox News reporter who's indicating that. I'm sure we're going to get to the bottom of it. Hopefully the chairman in a bipartisan way would be interested in what is clearly would be a violation of law and Department of Justice proceedings.
If there were any evidence that we disclosed information to a reporter that wasn't appropriate for public release or wasn't disclosed to the Congress, I would agree with you. I'm not aware of that.
Okay, now Department of Justice investigations should be free of political interference, true?
Absolutely.
Can we put up a tweet from Donald Trump on November 3rd at 3:57 a.m. in the morning? God knows what he was doing at that time other than tweeting. It says, everybody, can we put that tweet up?
Mr. Chairman, I ask the unanimous consent that the clock stop while we're trying to.
What was the gentleman's request?
Yeah, the committee had been given notice of a tweet that I wanted displayed on the screen last evening, and I've been asking for that to be put up.
And there's some technical difficulty in doing that?
Yes.
All right, yeah, we'll suspend.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the gentleman had 1 minute and 45 seconds.
We'll make sure he gets plenty of time.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Well, in the interest of time, Mr. Chairman, I'll just read what was written by the president. He said, everybody is asking why the Justice Department and FBI isn't looking into all of the dishonesty going on with crooked Hillary and the Dems. Let me ask you a question. Is it ever appropriate for a president, any president of the United States, to encourage the Department of Justice to launch criminal investigations against his or her perceived political enemies?
I'm not going to comment on that, Congressman. As I've explained previously, the President has put a team of experienced folks in charge of the Department of Justice, and we are not going to be influenced by anything other than the facts and the law.
Was that an appropriate tweet for the President of the United States to send?
It's not my role to opine on that.
Did the President's repeated attempts to encourage criminal prosecutions against perceived political enemies concern you, sir?
Congressman, as I said, we understand our responsibility, and we're going to continue to conduct our responsibility in accordance with the facts and the law. And I am grateful that the President has put an experienced team in charge of the Justice Department who understand what to do.
Okay, thanks. On June 20th, the New York Times published a wide-ranging interview with Donald Trump. In it, the President criticized you for being from Baltimore, saying there are very few Republicans in Baltimore, if any. So he's from Baltimore.
It's true.
Mr. Rosenstein, are you unable to be fair and impartial because you're from Baltimore?
Well, I'm actually not from Baltimore. I did work in Baltimore for 12 years. It's true that there are not a lot of Republicans in Baltimore.
Okay, Donald Trump's statement had no basis in reality, correct?
Well, as I said, that part of it was true.
Okay, Preet Bharara is the former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, true?
Yes.
And he was fired by Donald Trump in March, is that correct?
Along with almost all sitting U.S. attorneys.
And the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York has prosecutorial jurisdiction over Trump Tower in Manhattan, correct?
Has jurisdiction over everything in its jurisdiction.
Okay, in presidential interviews of U.S. attorney candidates, as has been reported to be the case for Preet Bharara's replacement, that would be a departure from traditional presidential protocol, correct?
For the President personally to conduct the interview?
That's correct.
I'm not aware of all the prior practices. I don't think it was done in the last two administrations that I'm familiar with.
Okay. And you were appointed by President Bush and then continued in that position as U.S. Attorney for Maryland by Barack Obama. That's correct?
That's correct. As a matter of law, I was appointed and never removed. Correct.
Okay. Were you ever asked by President Bush for a loyalty pledge?
No.
Were you ever asked by President Barack Obama to take a loyalty pledge?
No.
Is it ever appropriate for the President of the United States to demand that Department of Justice official or FBI director take a loyalty pledge?
I don't have any opinion about that, Congressman. Nobody's asked me to take a loyalty pledge other than the oath of office.
Thanks. I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for being here. Just so it's clear, I'm one of the numerous members of the Judiciary Committee that have asked for a second special prosecutor based on what Mr. Jordan earlier said. The Justice Department is responsible for investigating criminal conduct. Would that include criminal conduct by the NSA?
Yes.
Okay. We all learned under the prison that was happening years ago by the NSA that the NSA was doing, in my opinion, unconstitutional surveillance on Americans and their emails by tracking it and hacking in to see those emails. Came to light under Snowden. After Snowden, who I care nothing for, brought that to America's attention. The NSA said, we're not going to do that anymore, which I think is appropriate because I thought it was unconstitutional. And we've heard reports through the media that there has been unmasking of information. What I mean by that is classified information is seized on somebody, and someone else, an American, that their name is caught up in the communication, and if someone leaks who that was, unmask that individual, my understanding is if it's classified information, whoever does that unmasking has committed a felony. Is that correct?
The only distinction I would make, Congressman, is the unmasking typically is something done in the course of the intelligence analysis. The leaking would be a violation.
That's what I'm talking about, the leaking of that information. And as of today, has anybody been indicted under PRISM? Has anybody been indicted under leaking information on unmasking up until today? Has the Justice Department indicted anybody under those two scenarios and events?
We have indicted, prosecuted people for leaking. I'm not certain whether, I don't believe any of them related to unmasking.
So no one's been indicted, to your knowledge, which I want to bring up now the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act that has been discussed by this committee numerous times. It's the law that allows secret courts to issue secret warrants to try to go get terrorists that are operating overseas and get their information. Does the Justice Department present those FISA warrants to a FISA judge?
In situations where a warrant is required, yes, it needs to be obtained from a federal judge.
That's right. But the Justice Department is responsible for that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Also under FISA, once again, Americans are brought into the scenario because you target a foreign terrorist and then you go after their emails and then you find emails of Americans, and those are inadvertently caught in the surveillance of the target. According to the Washington Post recently, 90% of those inadvertent emails are on Americans. And my question to you is, why hasn't the Justice Department, the FBI, the intelligence community presented to Congress and our request that took place years ago, how many of those inadvertent emails, communications, text messages, conversations have been on Americans. We have been asked for the number. Do you know why that has not been brought to our attention? And let me just follow up with this reason. Here's the reason we need it. We're getting ready to maybe reauthorize 702, which I have a lot of problems with. I think it's unconstitutional in many other ways. But beside the point, here we are at a deadline getting ready to reauthorize it, and still the intelligence community refuses to tell us how many Americans' information has been seized. Can you tell us why we haven't gotten that information that we've asked for years?
No, I testified at a hearing with Director Coates, who I think would be a more appropriate person to answer that because he has access to the data, and he has explained it. But I would simply point out that you use the term inadvertent. I think the term that we use is incidental. If you're
incidental, I don't mind the problem. The name of the change.
My point is simply if you're investigating a foreign terrorist, knowing with whom that person is communicating relevant to your investigation. And so it's not.
That's not my question. My question was, we're getting ready to maybe reauthorize 702. I don't think we ought to reauthorize it until we find out from the intelligence community where there are no indictments that have been issued against the intelligence community based upon the statements that you have made to see whether or not they're violating the law, and they refuse to give this committee the information about how many people have been caught up in that. And it's been stonewalled by the intelligence community saying, well, we just can't do it. Why can't the intelligence community get some geek over at Best Buy and have them come in and answer that question with a few little taps into the big computer system? We just want the number.
The time of the gentleman has expired. The witness may answer the question.
As I explained, Congressman, I've heard Director Coates explain this, and he's better positioned than I.